Cool. So this is May 17th, 8 a.m. UTC, I think, if I'm getting my time zones correctly. The Runway kind of design discussion. One of the topics I guess I would like to cover today, there's a few different things. I've added some extra questions I thought I would overnight. But one of the topics that we didn't cover yesterday, and it's a relatively, hopefully a simple discussion, but I do think we should discuss it and talk about it here, is the deployment setup, so the actual deployment process. So that is under the component deployer section on the document. And I guess the first big question is, which we've gone a little bit backwards and forwards, and I'm still a little bit backwards and forwards of the having the idea of having a dedicated deployment project for each service repo, or doing the deployments within the service repo itself. So the pros and cons are each if it's a dedicated deployment project, the pros of that is basically we get an entirely secure model, in terms of we have a deployment project, it's locked down, we can give permissions to that project to say talk to the reconciler or clusters or any bits and pieces, but developers themselves don't have maintainer privileges or privileges in that to kind of deviate or see credentials and things like that. The cons of that is you're doing downstream pipelines, which the user experience can sometimes not be the best, to put it lightly. The alternative is we basically get rid of the dedicated deployment project, and deployments happen within the service code repository, probably still as a child pipeline, but just as a child pipeline in that repository. The cons of that, though, we then have to essentially, I guess, give that repository, like the source, the service repository, the code repository, the credentials, or it needs to talk to the reconciler or the platform or the cluster or whatever to actually deploy itself. And so maybe there's a trade-off for security there. I'm not entirely sure. And it's worth noting when we discuss all this, I haven't got security's input. They may have a different opinion. So anyone got any thoughts one way or the other to begin with?
So
yeah,
okay, go Igor.
Okay, so there's 2 points that come to my mind. The first one is access to logs. So as far as I know, it's not possible to restrict CI output for only a subset of stuff, of jobs. And so basically we need to be a lot more careful about what we output if it's going to be public, right? So that's kind of a whole can of worms.
Oh, right.
The second one, I can't remember. So Andrew, you go and we'll come back.
I mean, my take is that, we are with dedicated, we've been using this OIDC approach for a while now, and we're using it even for like the highest security thing. So we're using it to authenticate against an AWS organizational accounts and deploy things at that level, right? Like we feel we can build trust. There's like, we have a pseudo mode where we put credentials into a pipeline, but that's just for certain cases. But literally everything else we're using OIDC. My take is that, like, if you can use those only short-lived credentials, there's no shared long-lived credentials, and I think that should be like a cornerstone. That we've been doing that on dedicated, and I'll never go back from that. When I look at people storing long-term credentials, I'm like, whoa, that's terrible. And so I think, first of all, we provide short-term credentials. Second of all, the credentials that project is exposed to, at most, give them a blast radius of a namespace, right? They are not credentials that give you access at the cluster level or at the cloud provider level. They are at the namespace. So then the question is, somebody goes, and with OIDC, the way we do it is we have different credentials for different branches. So effectively we say, these credentials, when you're working on a merge request, for example, we allow plan. So we do read request into the cloud provider, into the organizational account, but not write request. In order to do write request, you need to be on the main branch. And so those two things have got different credentials. So in the case of running it inside the project, right? Basically, if somebody really wants to abuse it, they can get a credentials down into, they can do some sort of exploit into the main branch of that project. And then at that point, they have access to their entire world, but it's also recorded in Git, right? So I think there's like a level of trust that we have to have because this is an internal platform. And to me, I feel that is a reasonable level of trust. If we find out that somebody's doing that, that is a serious offense. And, we would kind of question, I mean, there'll be a very serious kind of like, what the hell are you doing here? But even if they did that, it would be at the level of their own namespace. Ultimately, it would be limited credentials. So to me, it feels like getting these things out of the way would make things a lot easier. I'm actually working on some stuff for Dedicated at the moment where we have these pipelines that kick off downstream pipelines. And it's such an awful way of working because I'm trying to make changes to one project and test them in the other project, but the other project is pulling the main branch. And I just really dislike that it's such an awkward way of working. And I can't wait. It's temporary scaffolding for Switchboard, for how we use CI pipelines at the moment. But it also reflects in the speed at which developers, the productivity of the team, right? Because it's so awful to have to kind of jump through all of these hoops to get everything done. And I think also there's kind of like a psychological aspect to it, which is saying, we're giving it to you, you run it, you own it, within bounds. You could maybe say something like, we expect that all changes to the main branch, the projects have to have two approvals or whatever it is, or at least one approval that's not the author. But you're trusting the team, right? You're giving them that access. And I think that's an important psychological change.
I think you've hit it on nail on the head at the hit there. God, sorry, it's been a long day.
I know exactly what you were saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I guess that was always the trade-off where I was looking at it and coming from. I was being very defensive, like, don't let developers access, because what my worry was is, first of all, we were going to do OAuth no matter what. So that's a standard. Like I agree.
Yeah,
that is the only way we're going to do stuff wherever it lives. I do agree, and I have no love for triggering pipelines. I can tell you long stories
as a member
of
of the delivery team. I'm sure I fully trust you on that.
Yeah. But it was really that defensibility, because realistically, a maintainer, if we do deployment, basically giving the service repositories credentials that they could just be like force delete their environment or do whatever they want. I was like, oh no, let's not do that. Let's pull it away into a different repo as defensibility. But if we're saying Igor's still got a point about public access and everything, we should circle back to that actually and kind of figure that out. But in terms of, if we're just happy to say we trust you, like you can just write yourself a CI job that just deletes everything and commit it to main and off you go, then I guess if that's the decision we want, that's
we're
fine.
Using on some of our going back to that organizational pipeline, we've got 15-minute credentials, right? And so in those, like sometimes when I'm debugging things, I print the credentials out, I delete the job afterwards because I'm trying to debug something, and it's not the end of the world, right? Because they're super, everything's short-lived, right? And that makes a huge difference.
It's not that, it's just, it was really the philosophy of not giving developers ways to shoot themselves in the foot. And it sounds like we're making a conscious decision where we say, look, we will give them the blast radius, obviously, but they could completely shoot themselves in the foot if they want to. Yeah. Which I'm happy.
And that's a way of giving ownership as well, right? Like
yeah, sure.
Yeah. Anyone with kids kind of knows that as well. Like Yeah.
So look, I'm more than happy then to kind of revisit that decision. How are you feeling though, Igor?
So I remembered my second point also, which was the way that we would then probably do that is via CI templates that they would
Yep.
pull in, right?
Yep.
And I guess I've seen a lot of cases where there's like scheduled pipelines or some other kind of pipelines and weird sets of constraints where jobs are suddenly popping up in places where you don't want them to be. Maybe that's solvable. Maybe that's not a huge concern, or maybe we can just offload that onto the devs and be like, deal with it. But I do think the isolation of a separate project for running those pipelines does buy us a little bit in control over how that downstream pipeline would then actually look like.
Yeah. I think you're right. And once again, that's the trade-off. They could include, like we will say, include this CI file, which with it's got the very nice constructed pipeline we have for you, but absolutely nothing stopping them from overriding it, changing it, doing whatever they want.
I don't think it's not an access thing, right? So they can, if they wanna, like they basically are able to elevate their privileges to the service account for their namespace or their service. I think that's a given.
And that is really kind of the going back to the trust thing. Like, do we, like, to me, it, we want to discourage them highly from doing that. And maybe we need some internal terms of service, but in fact we definitely do. But to me, it's sort of like, we don't want to sort of treat them like idiots, right? We want to say, like, we're giving this to you. You're going to run your services. When they alert, it's up to you to respond to them. And so, we're going to, you need to be responsible for this thing. Yeah.
The downstream pipeline, they would have full access to that, right? So that is, for all intents and purposes, theirs. We create it for them, but from then on, it's theirs.
As long as they don't need to, like, I don't really mind either way, as long as they don't need to send a merge request that gets approved by us to make a change to their world, right? Because that's we have to be out of the way. Because as soon as it becomes that, then it's us. It's our problem. It's our ownership.
No, that's already baked in.
That's never a question. It's the way these projects would work is they're basically like containers, both for security and for isolation. Like they're containers of the pipelines. The pipelines themselves are stateless. We will have a definition that's included from a central place that we can update if we want to add new features to the pipeline. That was the idea. It was instead of, and that's why the decision is actually a pretty two-way decision. Either they can include some file in their own, or we set them up a repo and the file.
That's a really good point about it. We can change this later on. It's not a fundamental architecture decision that we can never come back from, right?
So
I'm honestly leaning more towards having a separate repo still at this point.
Sure.
As long as it's just a once-off setup, and that is where we wave them by.
And I think you're right. Maybe in time, I honestly, there's an opinion here that we absolutely need and we haven't got at the moment, which is security. So my top priority is tomorrow, I'm going to ask security about what they think, because at the end of the day, they have authority over that kind of stuff more than any of us in terms of like they're going to have an opinion that's probably going to be quite strong about what we can and can't do.
Do you have a person that you're intending to reach out to?
No, I was just going to drop a ticket in, but if anyone knows of a quicker way to get a response, I'm all ears.
So with Dedicated, we've been working a lot with Paolo, and I found him to be a great partner, Paolo Martins. And the other thing that's beneficial about him, and Philippe as well, is the other person I was going to say, Maren, The nice thing about Paolo and Philippe actually is they're both big advocates of these short-term no shared secrets, and they've seen us develop those processes for dedicated, and so they're fully on board with that way of doing things.
Yeah, so totally want to do the OAuth stuff no matter which way we go. Is there any like quick and dirty guide or something I can look at to make sure I think I've been doing it already?
If you look, so in the
I'm happy to
top,
dig into code.
there's an OIDC template which you can include, which is only AWS at the moment.
Is that in Common CI?
Yeah, here, let me just give you, but it's only and then there's also, I just put it into there. I should probably just put it into the doc rather. I don't know where we are in the doc. But the other one is the security team. I'll have to find this quick. Have created a Terraform module for setting up OIDC between GitLab.com and GCP.
Cool.
And I mean, it's basically like there's 20 of them. They've just taken one and made it the official GitLab one, which is nice. Okay. Where is these folks? OIDC module. Terraform. Yeah, here maybe, yes. And so that would give you here's an issue to look through. And
yeah, there is anything I can go away and find it myself. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I mean, setting up the identity provider and the cloud providers, it's not a lot of work, but yeah,
cool.
It's super quick to do that.
Perfect. So Igor's got another question then, which is for canarying. Do we manage that for developers? Do we expose it and let them decide? Same with trigger promotions. Should we have the service model expose whether trigger from staging to production is a manual or an automatic process, or should we just take that away, the complexity away, and pick one?
My preference for the beginning, and maybe this is one of the things you can iterate on, but especially coming in from Friday's incident, which is basically a no canary incident. The container registry, right? Like,
oh yeah, right.
Things happen.
Where they couldn't.
But if you don't have a canary, like things are always gonna be broken. But like if you don't have a canary, then you know they're not going to be caught. But anyway, like the way I kind of feel on it is maybe as the first version we don't give any control on it, but we have it doesn't necessarily have to be a canary stage, but we have a gradual rollout. Going to like 10%, 25%, 50%, whatever. And we have, a fixed SLO monitoring model. And basically, like if you are meeting your SLOs, it will continue forward. And if you're not meeting your SLOs, it will basically roll back. And there's another reason why I like that over kind of talking about a specific canary. And that is that there's kind of this non-determinism in like how many of your services will be the old one and how many you're new. And it sort of forces people to think about like backwards compatibility.
Compatibility, yeah.
And it's like, for the next 2 hours, you do not know, and we can add instrumentation to tell them later on, but it's like, you don't know, we're going to muddle this up, and it forces that onto them to think about it.
Yeah. Completely on board. Okay, so I think then what I'm hearing makes sense. We're just going to do a gradual rollout model, monitoring SLOs during the way. So I guess then the question is promotions. So are we still happy with, at least for a first passer model, of a deploy to staging will happen, then a promotion event will happen, and then a gradual rollout, canary gradual rollout to production?
But I think the staging one must also have the gradual in it as well.
Okay,
so it must gradually, because otherwise, we didn't know that we had, changing the structure of this Redis key was going to break everything. So we've got to have the same gradual, maybe over a short.
It can be accelerated.
Sure.
But make sure that we, and also that we are checking the SLOs of both the old and the new during that time.
Correct. Yep. Okay. Sounds great. So then the last thing is.
So one more question on that. So for monitoring the SLOs, are we thinking of building like an automated rollback, or do we just put in alerting and put that on the developers for now.
So my take on it, and I don't know, I haven't looked at the products that are out there, but most of the things I looked at have got a percentage thing, right? Where you can say put it at 20,
That part is fine.
And so yeah, if we I guess the question is whether that's
What
triggered
happens when something goes
I mean, it would be
wrong?
really nice
Yes.
if that was triggered automatically.
Right. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I think it would be the best way.
It sounds it sounds wonderful, but it sounds kind of complex to develop something like that. So
I
think
my gut feeling. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think for the first iteration, I'm not sure if we can do auto rollbacks. So I think what would happen is it would just, the pipeline would fail, that we would trigger an alert, we'd Slack notify them, but they would have to either do a merge revert, like git revert the commit and
roll
deploy forward, or fix it and roll forward.
But Graeme, what you're saying is that it won't proceed forward. So say it's at 10% and the alert gets triggered. It's not going to, unless they stop it, it's automatically going to stop at 10%, and then they need to roll it back to 0 for now. And then we can put that in as a feature in future.
True. I guess
once customers start using it, like we'll get all these needs, some things they'll say, oh, we want this, we don't want that.
So if we implement the staged increments ourselves, then we can add effectively a Prometheus instant query and use that as a gate on whether to continue rolling forward or not, as a one-time check.
Yeah, so I'll have to figure out how that
SLO
works
is bad
CI.
For unrelated reasons. I think that's another point though, right? Like, if SLO is bad for unrelated reasons, then we can't deploy. So
so there's we've got a lot of experience with this in delivery already, and I've already planned it in the design for this. So we will do deployment health checks before we start deployment. So the platform and your deployment has to be healthy, or maybe we need to be a bit more flexible, because if you've got a bad SLO and you're trying to put a fix out, we need to make that. But we will do some basic checking that, like, yes, the health of the platform is okay before we start deploying, because there's no reason trying to deploy if you're already like your platform's unhealthy for whatever reason.
If you're not meeting the SLO.
So
the one change that I'd like from the current way that we do things in delivery, we actually have different thresholds for the deployment SLOs and the normal ones, and I think that for this it'd be much better just to keep them all the same.
Totally. We should. I think it's likely we kept those thresholds. There's probably a historic reason, I'm sure. There's a reason we did it.
What's the deployment SLO?
It's basically a different, if you go into the metrics catalog, there's this I think it's even called like deployment SLO, and it's a different number that controls, and it's unrelated to the alerting. It's called mean time to failure as well. Mean time to failure. It's got it's like a checkered history, but it's basically a different number from the normal SLO. So you might be using one number for alerting, but a different number for determining whether to kind of
now I see what you're saying. Okay, for the gating.
We should just keep that. Like just hide that from people.
So then I guess the final point, which I think was perhaps Igor's initial question for 3, which is, so promotion from staging to production, do we want it automatic, manual, or customer decides? Like the process of, like, it's gone to staging, nothing's gone wrong. Do they have to manually promote to production? Should it just happen automatically, or should we let them decide?
So on one hand,
make it manual for starts. We can. I think that one is very easy to change.
It is. I need to know something.
Do we get a situation where people forget to, they push to master or main rather, and that kind of kicks off a staging deploy, and
they walk away.
They go away for the weekend, and then on Monday somebody else pushes. So
I guess we could have
deliveries. That's far more rare to have a dead deploy than none. Let's do it, and then that's one of those things. It's also, again, it's like we can iterate on it, right? So let's just have it manual. We
could also have a notification that says, "Hey, your production deploy is like staging is ahead
Yeah.
by
Yes.
3
Yeah.
days,
Yeah.
you might want
I
to
think this
get those in sync.
what
Ultimately,
will
I think the goal would be automatic. Sorry,
yeah.
Graeme.
Oh yeah. No. I think you're right, and I think that's the key. It'd probably be automatic. Let's not distract too much time with this. Let me do the first implementation manual, and honestly, we may just
Yeah.
overnight decide to flick it to automatic anyway,
Yeah.
and just make things
Agreed.
less confusing.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
just again, going back to the dedicated, and it's weird. I've been thinking about dedicated more and more as a platform, and the platform only does one thing, which is it deploys GitLab application.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's a kind of different story on that, which is that when we started kicking off the pipelines, the engineers said, "Oh, we want to have manual control over like every step, and we want to be able to run the pipelines." And then I got really sick of that because I hate doing things in that way. And I put a label on the merge request. They just like, it's called fully automated deploy.
Yeah.
And
Gotcha.
I think that I've seen people not use that label like a handful of times in 2 years because it's
Yeah.
like, it's a total pain, like rather
Yeah.
automate things, right? But let's start that way. And then when people get confidence, then you will.
Yeah, I think we'll probably change it very quickly, which is fine. That's cool.
Exactly.
All right, I'm happy to move on from that. So step 4 is question 4 under deployer. So currently, Igor and I were talking about this. If we do have this separate deployment project, we were thinking as the first iteration, you could put your environment variables in there for like what you needed for the containers. I was thinking about that a little bit more today, and I was like, actually, so environment variables and configuration. How do we feel about actually moving? So secrets, I'm not talking about secrets for right now, just talking about standard publicly available environment variables or boring kind of things. Putting them into the service manifest so they can be deployed as a merge request change. Because what I'm wondering will happen is someone will update an MVAR in the deployment project, or let's say it is the service project, wherever it lives. Because updating a CI variable or something won't trigger a deploy, they could walk away, someone else merges code, and then it deploys, it falls over because they've changed an environment variable. Whereas if they have to change environment variables through the service manifest, they have to do a merge request, it triggers a pipeline, they get that immediate feedback that by the change they made is the cause of this breakage kind of thing. Does that make sense? Like keeping environment variables.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Cool. The only potential downside I see to that is environments. So with project variables, you kind of get the built, or like CI variables, you get the built-in per environment thing. I guess that would mean we would have to have a per environment config in the manifest, right?
Correct. And that's the only downside, is expanding that model to be like environment variables staging, environment variables production.
Yes.
But I'm open to any option.
So
sounds fine to me.
Just going back to dedicated, like we have that exact model with dedicated where we have like an environments directory kind of at the top of all the projects that need it. And then there's like various different environments and variables in there. That's great for dedicated because it's all private at the moment. And there's no secrets in there, but there's still things like email addresses or, host names, and it's kind of awkward stuff to have public.
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought about that, but I'm just thinking about now, like some of it is it's not secret, but it's also not like publicly open stuff. So I don't really know how we, maybe that's another good reason to have a second project, but then you get back to the problem of like who has control over that project.
Yeah, I guess the other thing is if we support multiple ways of doing it, then there's going to be some kind of merging that needs to happen, and that can be really painful to debug. So I'm leaning more towards keeping this on the project level for now.
Sure. Okay. Sounds good. Yep, that's fine. We'll just need to make sure people are clear when you're changing environment variables, the next pipeline's going to affect. And honestly, People are not gonna, because this is secrets, right? This is not secrets, so not passwords. How many? I don't think people change environment variables that much. They're more likely to add new ones than they are to actually like start changing things around. So it's probably an over optimization for a very small use case.
The other way to look at it is if there's something like an email address that you're not comfortable about, stick it in a secret. And just say, well, just use that for that thing.
I mean, at the end of the day,
the secrets have to be per environment as well, right?
Yeah, they will. And in fact, that's the other option we could do as well, is we just say anything secret or not is a secret. Like, you know, if we're going to have to do the work to support secrets, whether you put something boring, like like something that's completely boring, or something that's actually secret, like the secret store doesn't have to be just for secrets. You could put just boring information in there. So maybe that's the other option, is we just say everyone just put it in the bolt. And
the one thing that I like about keeping as much as possible in Git is you get the change control.
That's
element.
what I also like.
So yeah, that's the one side with with CI
and I guess
variables.
the
It's like who
auditability.
changed this when, and I don't know what Vault's like with the usability of that, but GitLab CI secrets is terrible.
Yeah. Okay, so
and there's timing issues and stuff. So maybe keep we just do it for things like, you know, whatever, orange secrets or yellow, or whatever. I don't know what the least secret is, but you know, we keep like things that are not secret at all in the service manifest, and we keep anything else in secrets.
Yeah, and people can just, because they'll have to have both, and then you know, they can decide. And honestly, we may end up just like, if we feel the Vault experience is fine, it might just make sense to not have two places and just say go do it in, go put them all in Vault, and therefore
I'm fine supporting both. I think we'll probably revisit this more than once anyway.
I think so. That's fine. So number 5 is a very small one. Sorry, I'm just going to put down a note here. Push mvars into service model. Number 5 is looking at the blueprint. We called out secrets in Vault, which is correct. We should probably add it to the diagram. It was just a small quick note, because at the moment we have got secrets in the deployment project, which might be confusing. It sounds like for iteration, we were talking about putting secrets in GitLab CI for iteration, like the first iteration, but I'm not sure if the first iteration we can do that, or whether we have to do Vault for the first iteration of this project. Like, because it adds complexity.
We have examples of what these secrets are going to be. I mean, I guess the obvious one is GitLab tokens.
GitLab tokens, I'd say, would be the biggest one.
Again, and like, this is I'm opening up a can of worms here, but it would be really nice if we could have like a service-to-service authentication thing that did not use GitLab tokens, but it's a whole different.
Yeah, sure. I agree.
I think this is going to prompt that, because we're going to have to think about that, because we can't have all these, especially if they're admin tokens.
I know.
That's a different discussion.
So Andrew, are you saying we need to support Vault from the get-go?
Yeah, I mean, I find personally, I find GitLab secrets to be super sketchy, particularly because if I can't find a secret, I know that the best place to go get it is go into CI and go and get one out of there. And that is terrifying, especially for admin secrets. Like, I don't mind it for Slack tokens, which is what I do all the time. But for GitLab secrets, that's a really bad security stance. So maybe we should say Vault is in from the beginning.
That's fine. I'm happy with that call. Maybe reliability can spend some cycles, and I'm sure they've got a lot of Vault wizards, so they can probably help us out with that. That's fine, and that also means that the idea of separate deployment project versus not a separate deployment project, if we move secrets away, then that becomes more of a two-way decision, because at the moment it wouldn't be, because if we try, we in our current first idea for the first iteration without Vault, we've got nowhere to put secrets that's really safe. So I think if we just get Vault involved from the start, then we can, that keeps that more of a two-way decision, because we don't care, it's all off in the side.
Cool. So in terms of where the Vault interaction would happen, I guess it would be reconciler. So we'll have Vault down here, and then this is effectively Terraform, right? So
Yeah.
Terraform will basically pull in from Vault is kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Which is exactly the same as dedicated with our reconciler is called Instrumenter, and it's Secret Managers, AWS Secrets Manager. But yeah, it's exactly the same.
Okay.
It just has references to secrets, like, and then it does the look, in the config, you say, I'm going to use, put the secret from XYZ in here. And then it does the lookup inside that reconciler, which is the only place that has got the appropriate permissions to do that.
Yeah.
In actual fact, with we have a way of we have multiple stages, like we have onboarding and provision, and we actually, for each secret, we say, these are the stages that can access, read, or write each individual secret, and it works really well.
Cool. So that was most of the stuff I had from deployment perspective. This gives me, thank you so much for the time. This gives me an almost 100% crystal clear picture of like exactly what we're doing. Like I could sit down and actually crack open an implementation of this, which I think is where we want to get to, at least for that component. So one other question I wanted to revisit, just based off Igor, we had a discussion yesterday, like just picking a target runtime, like where we're just going to pick for the starters. We landed on Cloud Run because it just seemed simple and easy.
Cloud Run in Cloud Run or Cloud Run in Anthos, out of interest?
I think Cloud Run in Cloud Run, but discovered today Cloud Run in Cloud Run doesn't support GPUs.
Oh,
is that a concern?
And Cloud Run in Anthos
does, but that's because it's running in your own Kubernetes cluster.
You can provision any nodes.
Yeah, you just put it on a node pool, and it just makes sense.
I don't like, so there's a difference here between, because I think ultimately we maybe want to support multiple runtimes. So this could also be a question of first iteration versus future iteration, but I just wanted to be aware if we go Cloud Run, there's no GPUs. I don't know how important that is.
With that, with your thinking on multiple runtimes, the service manifest is pretty much the same in all cases, but maybe there's restrictions on different, like if there's a GPU section, it's like, no, you're using you can't do this. And that's all in validation.
Yeah, exactly. That comes down to like,
I mean, I think either that or we migrate and we say V01 is on Cloud Run. V02, we discovered new requirements. We need to support GPUs. We need to support this. And then we move it to, Anthos or Knative or whatever. And then we have more control. But we can sort of gradually move that. Without
I think if we do it that way, if we kind of like, this is our side of the, we'll decide what happens on our side of the fence. The only thing you've got to consider there is that it will be our responsibility to do that migration.
The migration.
Yes.
And so that's something just to think about. Like, because I think it's a very reasonable argument, but then that adds that on.
Yep.
So the outcome is we're going to stick with that. That's fine. And we'll just see if that changes things in the future.
So there was one question that I came up with. It's down below under observability. So we were talking a little bit about wanting to go with Prometheus, and that doesn't really mesh with Cloud Run in Cloud Run so much, right?
Yeah. Maybe.
So we do have some prior art on this. We have this really weird little service called the Marquee Customer Exporter, which runs in Cloud Run and is scraped by Prometheus. And that is, so it doesn't necessarily, it's a bit weird, but you can sort of do it, sort of like it's a bit awkward, but the other thing you could maybe do is consider just using Push Gateway.
Yeah, I mean, or remote write.
with direct from the Cloud Run containers.
Yes.
So each container has its own like Prometheus agent in it. Yeah, it's kind of
Is that doable?
Quite a big idea, but we could try it. Pardon me,
Is
Graeme?
that even possible? Is that possible? Is it possible to put a client in that and run it alongside?
Well,
like,
Cloud Run is just a image, right? Like you get to
I
decide
think
whatever you want in there.
with
but
a sidecar, it could
yeah.
probably be done.
But Cloud Runs can't do sidecar, right? Like single container, or can it do
No,
sidecar?
Yeah, they can't.
I'm not so sure actually.
The other option, which I think I saw down there, is Stackdriver, and the thing that's quite nice about that is that we've already got Stackdriver Exporter set up, and if we just saying we're going on the ingress and we're using like fixed SLIs, and I think the basic SLI is error rate, right? Like, because that's super easy for us to tell.
Yeah.
And then we can just use Stackdriver Exporter for the first version, and that kind of removes all that other stuff from. I mean, Stackdriver Exporter is a bit weird sometimes, but
yeah, I mean that was kind of what I was thinking also.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit wonky.
Yeah.
To go that way, but maybe
a lot of
for a
problems
first
with ingestion, like time of ingestion. I don't know if that stuff's got better because Prometheus has got better at handling out of order. Stuff. But
we've had a lot of trouble with Stackdriver Exporter in the past, actually.
Maybe the thing is, it would save a lot of time if we could get it to work. So maybe there's like a time boxing thing there where we say, let's try this, and we'll construct a basic SLI from Stackdriver. If it doesn't work, we'll add that on as like another thing that we need to work out, because the alternatives are quite a lot more complicated. Like remote write and push gateway. The big problem is around like a cardinality on like instances that are cycling around. I mean, we already have that problem with Prometheus, but we would certainly add to it.
I mean, we probably want to deploy a dedicated Prometheus per service anyway.
Yeah, per namespace. Yeah, it's namespace and services 1-to-1, or is it namespace and team?
We've not made a distinction so far.
Namespace might be a nebulous concept. Is it a nebulous concept in Cloud Run? Like
it is, but if it was ultimately backed by something else,
for Kubernetes. Well, I mean, we can sort of consider if we want to have shared resources between services, and not in terms of access, but necessarily, but in terms of like, here's a Prometheus shared by all of these, so that we don't have to do one per.
But I suspect that it'll happen pretty quickly as well. Like they're going to say, well, we need a Redis that we want to stand up in here that's going to be shared by, the three servers that we're running. I mean,
out of scope for now.
Yeah, sniping us a bit, But down the line, I think there might be an idea of namespace to team rather than namespace to project.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's going to complicate things.
Time zone wise, Graeme, have you grabbed any time with Dylan? Because it's worthwhile, because time zone wise, you can spend mornings, because Dylan's got a lot of great experience around this, because first of all, they tried to build a platform with Auto DevOps and failed.
Yes. Which
I've carried lots of experience with that. But then the other side of it is Zookt and all of that he's trying to. So he comes at it from like a very complicated requirements point of view, and also from experiencing what customers kept demanding in Auto DevOps. So he's also a good person to talk through. But like, I think I went much more over to like namespace per team after talking to Dylan. So he's a good person to talk to.
I talked to him a lot. I gave him.
Okay.
I've been basically helping him with Zorkt and everything, and
Oh,
it's an
cool.
interesting use case because Zorkt, like, and I think that's what prompted a lot of like higher management interest in a bunch of these projects as well. But the problem with Zorkt is it's such a unique use case in that it's a stateful set. Like it's a
Yeah.
data, like it's
Yeah.
Elasticsearch
Yeah,
replacement.
and I don't think we should tie it in like couple
Yeah,
it
sure,
too
sure,
closely
yeah,
with us because it's it's like
yeah.
Yeah, but we
But it
we
is
can
interesting.
take
yeah.
some lessons from them.
Oh,
Yes.
totally. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's a good call out, and I work with him a lot. Yeah.
Okay,
So
cool.
I used to work with him on auto DevOps, like when customers and we were getting customers and design into auto DevOps, and so yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, no, that's a good call out.
Just on
So
that note of customers, like I really would like to bring it onto the platform sooner
I
because
agreed. Yep, I would like to absolutely
they really need
100%.
a platform to build on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I 100%. I was thinking that both of design and customers being other good targets for us to hit early on somewhere
Yes.
at the point.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess circling back to the discussion, so it would be good to have, like, what I don't want is being like, oh, Cloud Run's hard to monitor, we won't use it. Like, to me, I would hope that the observability piece can be separate from the runtime piece. Like, I don't want us to be too constrained by runtimes because our monitoring only works a certain way. So it'd be great if we can come up with a solution that would support Cloud Run and hopefully support Knative or whatever,
Yeah.
Anthos or whatever else we're going to target.
I mean, so I had this like really dirty thought of so alerting and monitoring is one thing, but almost like giving people access to the Cloud Run UI for monitoring, like read-only access, because you get your logs in there, right? You get your your little graphs, and they're really fast compared to our Thanos. You can say 30 days and if we could generate like a way for those teams to just be able, we give them a URL, like here's where you can go look. But it's not, I think we still need a story for monitoring and alerting that's not that, but for that's
iteration
not
0 could be an idea.
especially the logs, because you can I've done debugging with it, and it's could be a lot worse.
Logs is
something to keep in mind.
Can of worms also.
Oh yeah, gosh.
But that's where, if we use that off the bat, we could, if we give people access to that,
it makes it simple. It does make that problem very simple, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There's a different problem around organizational, like knowing, do you just give every engineer access to those logs?
Right, access control is the big question there. And like, can you do targeted access control only for a single service?
Yeah.
Is that even possible?
Yeah.
So, or do we need to create like GCP project per team then, right? So it gets kind of hairy.
Yeah, I think we don't need a GCP project per team because no, I don't know. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, it depends what server. Yeah, I don't know the permission structure off the top of my head.
But it's tied in. The one thing that's kind of nice about it is tied into the Google workspace stuff. So I don't know how our Okta stuff is tied into that. I don't know if those things are set up. Like whether in Okta, we do have things like SREs at site reliability engineers at GitLab.com, and that's kind of tied into the Google workspaces. I don't know how that's tied into this other stuff. Like I don't know if all teams have got that or how that works.
Yeah, me neither. Okay, we're approaching time, and well, it sounds like we don't really have a clear decision on this stuff yet. I'm gonna do a little bit of research into the remote write stuff and see how tricky that is to do.
You know that Nick Duff has delivered that, by the way. The remote write endpoint is available now.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. So
cool.
So that should assist with your investigations.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Is there any specific last topic anyone wants to discuss today?
I've got a lot of topics I'd like to discuss, but there's
Yeah.
no way they're going to fit into 4 minutes. So
Yeah.
I'd be really interested, Andrew, in getting some more time with you if you can make more of these kind of sessions too.
Yeah, totally. I'm very happy to join.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I would like to get hear a bit more about. So I'm really starting to focus on now. What are we going to do for iteration 0? How are we actually going to implement this? I'd like to hear about, like, you talked about Instrumenter, and
Yeah.
I've seen you mention TenSingTL. I would like to kind of hear a bit more,
Yeah.
maybe sometime, about
Yeah.
how those how those match to our model. How does that kind of work? Is there any opportunity
I think we could
for
almost
reuse?
take Tinkertoddle and do like another like a new iteration, knowing what we know now. Like you know, basically what we settled on is we have one templating technology that takes data and spits out YAML and HCL and everything, and that's JSON, and that we've just settled on that. And then we have another part which is which we've really kind of come to in more recent times, and that is using JSON schema for everything, because it gives us validation and it gives us autocomplete, and it's like so nice. It's all built in there. And you know, before, especially JSON, it was terrible for validation, and so we had this awful validation code, and we've got rid of all of that. And so there's like a bunch of things that I can show you through that.
Yeah, that'd be great. I've already adopted JSON schema for some of the delivery work we've been doing, like
really?
with release
Cool.
environments and stuff. Yeah, I
hassled
really Craig Miskell to give me a rundown and everything. So
oh, cool. Yeah. No, it works well. And it's like standard, you know, and you can
totally
repurpose it. Yeah.
So I'd be interested in understanding, what we can overlap with those kind of tooling and stuff. And I think that will really drive, like, okay, what can we actually implement as well?
Yeah. No, totally. I think that's I'm happy to just invite me to I'll get to
well,
I just made it back, as you can see from my run this morning, but I did get here on time. Yeah.
Also, Igor, if you want to do these later, don't feel like you have to do them earlier on my account. I'm still up for a few more hours. So yeah.
Okay. I mean, this is a good time for me, but
sure.
we can shift it as needed.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks everyone.
I'll stop the recording now.